Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to some more Lost in the Pond, and this is part 1 of 7 myths British people believe about America. I actually reacted to part 2 first, because I didn't realise there was a part, I mean, it said in the title there's a part 1, I just don't know if I thought maybe it was a year ago and maybe I'd already seen it, but I obviously haven't because it was quite a recent post. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to jump into this, hopefully going to enjoy. And yeah, links are in the description to my Patreon and all that stuff, but let's jump into this and see some of these
Hello,
myths.
this video is sponsored by BritBox, the premier
Oh,
streaming
money!
service for Britain's most beloved TV shows. I'm Lawrence Brown and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to myths. Specifically, myths that British people, including myself at one point, believed about the United States of America. But it is amazing what 14 years of living in the United States will do to your understanding and your perceptions about this very country. For instance, I learned early on that they don't have Cornish pasties, and I learned slightly less earlier on, so later, that Michigan has them. But I don't live in Michigan, so one way or another I still have to have them imported. A quick reminder that if you're not subscribed to this channel, you can change that fact about your life right now. But these myths go way beyond the absence of quintessentially British food. And so now that I've lived here for about a seventh of a century, it's time to outline some of the myths that us British believe about America and Americans. This is a funny one because I think television gives us this notion
Everyone lives
that
in a giant
Americans
house.
do all live.
I mean, I guess in the cities that's not going to be the case, is it? Because if you live in big cities, you're going to have the smallest house. I'm thinking of like New York, for example. There's like tiny apartments and stuff. But back in the day, I mean, how in terms of houses, the houses are typically bigger. But again, it depends where it is, and yeah, exactly where it is will depend on how big it is and how small it will be. But that's the same with England, to be fair. But I think in general the houses are bigger. But I guess the idea is everyone thought America's living in just big homes, which obviously isn't the case.
In giant houses like the McAllisters do in Home Alone. But it's not entirely the case. Sure, I mean, statistically, American houses are on average larger than their UK counterparts.
There we go.
There are a number of reasons.
But look, this I guess would just be a normal neighborhood in the US, right? This would be like a bougie neighborhood in the UK. Like, if you're living in this neighborhood, you know this person's making money. Like, these homes just look so much bigger. Look at the size of this garage door, by the way. It's massive.
Which I outlined in this video. But to say that all Americans live in really large houses is a complete fabrication of anything resembling the truth. And I was a good example of this before I became a YouTube sensation, because when I first moved to Chicago, we had to do things on a budget. Between me and my wife, we weren't making a great income, and this is a major city. So we had to sort of settle for an apartment whose dimensions were 300 square feet. And for those of you who don't know, that's about the size of a shoebox, roughly. You know, we had to leave our shoes outside the door. That's how small it was. And it is worth reiterating, I think, that the cost of living in the United States does fluctuate massively across the country. When I lived in Indiana, just one state over, we were paying about $530 a month. That's basically unheard of in Chicago. And it's certainly unheard of in New York City, which of course was the city in which the show Friends is set. And I think it's shows like that that gave us this impression that Americans were all living in big apartments.
Each has a
Speaking of houses, I was alerted to a tweet recently from a British person who couldn't believe that American addresses go way up into the thousands, and their
unless it continues from a previous street, maybe.
Belief on this was that every street in the United States has thousands of houses on it. And this was a belief that I used to have. Because the country is absolutely massive, so you almost expect it to have to house that many people. But the thing is, there are way fewer people in this country per square mile than there are in Britain, so it doesn't add up. And that's when I got looking into it. And in a previous video, I outlined it doesn't really work like that. On any given street, they don't start at the number 1 and then end at 10,000. Often, and it's the case here in Chicago, you'll usually have a string of houses, for example, all in the 6,000s on a given street. And that's because it's about 6 miles from the center of downtown. 1 mile in from that, they're all 5,000s. Another mile, they're all 4,000s, etc., etc. Now, not every...
Bro, look at this neighborhood, bro. They all look so similar, but they all look so big. Would this just be a normal neighborhood in a city, like a suburban neighborhood? Because these homes are so massive, bro. So massive, that does not sound like correct grammar. But, like, they're so big. maybe it's just the view or something, but like this one here, like it just looks massive for like just a suburban area, just like where anyone lives pretty much. Like obviously you'll get homes this size in the UK, but they would typically be a bit more expensive and in the nicer neighborhoods. I'm assuming this is a nicer neighborhood. I mean, it looks very, just I don't know. It just does look quite nice to be fair. It doesn't look very rough.
From that, they're all 5,000s. Another mile, they're all 4,000s.
Look at these ones, bro. Look how far back they go.
Etc., etc. Now, not every city in the US does it from the center of the city. It could be from another part of the city or just some other central point. But that's sort of a general rule for how the numbering works on US houses. This one comes up again and again, that the United States is such a young country that it basically doesn't have a history. And I've always thought of this perception of America to be quite a lazy one. Because even if you go back to 1776 through to the present day, yes, it is a short amount of time in comparison to the history of Britain, but think about all of the insane things that happened in that period. And even if you ignore all that, there's one thing that we tend to forget because we don't get taught it very deeply in Britain, and that is the thousands of years of native history that happened before we even turned up. I was absolutely blown away, not literally, that would be weird, when I went to Cahokia Mounds here in Illinois. Many hundreds of years ago, Cahokia Mounds used to be a native city, and it had about 20,000 people, which might not sound like a lot by both American and British standards, but back in the day, that was more than London. And I once read about this volcano eruption that happened in present-day Oregon a few thousand years ago. And this eruption was witnessed and recorded by Native Americans who were in the area at the time. And long story short, they basically saw the origins of Crater Lake, which is absolutely huge. To be honest, both Brits and Americans love their myths. I mean, we've got the Loch Ness Monster.
He's getting his money. He's getting his money. I've recently seen there's a scam of ads on people's videos. It's not this one, so don't worry. But I think there was a video that I actually just let it run through because I'm trying to let ads run through, and that was one of the scam ads. Oh, I don't know who it was, but what is the ad called? It's like when they plant trees and it was all found out to be just not happening. Yeah, but this is BritBox. I actually know BritBox, to be fair. It's everywhere and it's quite good, to be fair. You get a lot of British shows and all that good stuff. Well, you literally get all British shows pretty much. All the good ones anyway. I know this guy. And this is where you can watch it. And yeah, he's getting his money. If you're interested, you know how it is. Links will be in the description. If you want to see some British shows, some classic British shows, I'm sure this ad will help you get that what you're wanting pretty much.
Head to BritBox.com/LostInThePond and use the promo code LostInThePond when signing up for a monthly subscription, and you'll get 50% off your first month. The link is also in my description below.
Not too shabby.
This one is embarrassing for me because
I used to think that, to be honest. I mean, I used to hear the accents. I mean, I still probably do. I still wouldn't be able to differentiate between a Canadian speaking and an American speaking. Obviously, there's certain American accents that I can like hear, and you're like, yeah, I can tell you're from America. Like, obviously, Southern accents are probably the easiest. New York, like spread around in like throughout the US, you can hear different accents. But like, the sort of, what is it? What's the word I'm trying to look for? With accents, the most stereotypical US accent. And then I hear a Canadian speaking. I'm like, this sounds the same to me, but he's obviously going to explain here.
Because years ago, I believed that Canada and the United States were basically the same country. And the reason that I believe that is, number one, I was 12, so cut me some slack. And number two, my only sort of exposure to both countries was through the people, was through the way they spoke. And to my young ears, which couldn't yet differentiate these two accents, Macho Man Randy Savage and Bret Hart basically had the same accent, just with an entirely different timbre. And that's all I had to go on. And I think it's what a lot of British people have to go on, because I still occasionally see those comments. Oh, what is the difference between Canada and America? Or is it essentially that one has Mounties and the other doesn't? And it's only since I moved here that I've become super aware of the substantial difference between the two countries. Completely different healthcare systems, completely different food, completely different use of English. Right, in Britain, we call it the loo. In America, they call it a restroom. In Canada, they call call it a washroom. And I've seen all manner of different examples of that kind of thing. In America, they don't celebrate Boxing Day. In Canada, they do. The Canadian dollar is different to the American
I would have thought Boxing Day would be huge in the US because it's pretty big in the UK.
dollar. In some ways, they go with British English in places that America doesn't. And now that I'm older and I've listened to some of the regionalisms throughout the United States, even the way Americans speak is different to how Canadians speak. I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but these differences certainly go way beyond how the two countries pronounce the word about. I've touched on this before, but I couldn't really do a video without including it in this list. This perception that Americans are loud and boisterous. And I can understand on some level where that comes from, because I think the way Americans speak, it comes from a different part of the throat. So it's a bit more projected, right? Whereas us Brits,
He's nailed that though.
it comes from a different part of the throat. So it's a bit more projected.
Bro, he's nailed that. Come on.
Right? Whereas us Brits, it's more sort of, I don't know, understated a lot of the time. I think another reason that we think Americans are loud is how they present themselves in films. There might even have been a time in my life where I thought all Americans were loud just because Jim Carrey was. He's Canadian, isn't he? He is Canadian. And
Oh, you got me there, man. Oh, just for the previous topic as well.
culturally speaking, I definitely have found that
Is he
Americans
Canadian? That was a voice crack. Is he actually Canadian though? I thought he was from the US. What the hell?
speak at a higher volume when they're in restaurants together, but there are so many other examples of the opposite being true. On match day, after we've had a pint or six, you know, we're singing the songs of our team who we love because they happen to be situated in the town that we were born in. And it's just what we do when we leave a nightclub, which, you know, I haven't done in 20 years. But when we did, you know, I'd be on the street yelling at traffic cones because that might have just been me. But what I'm saying is, when we get drunk, we very much give Americans a run for their money. There's a loud person in all of us, right? And once we free ourselves of our inhibitions, we can let out all of the decibels we want. That's not a call to action. It's merely an observation.
Americans all walk around with fanny packs.
This is only funny, not because of the image of Americans walking around with bomb bags on, but it's because we call them bomb bags and you call them fanny packs, and it's bloody hilarious. It is also partly the visual, because bomb bags have never been cool, but this notion, which I occasionally read, that Americans are just always walking around wearing one, is very laughable, especially as somebody who's lived here 14 years. So it's quite dumbfounding, this one. I'm not saying that all British people think this way, but the ones that do, I'd be very interested to hear, do they think that way because they met an American in 1994 and they've just held on to that belief? Or are American tourists still wearing bomb bags? Do people carry cash? But I don't. I can tell you this, I don't have a bomb bag / fanny pack radar, right? I am not constantly surveilling the populace to see whether they do or do not have a fanny pack. But my feeling is...
That sounds so wrong. It sounds so wrong, but obviously you know what he's saying. But to be fair, the name fanny pack makes a bit more sense. But wait, does it bum bag? Why is it a bum bag in the UK? Because it's not even on your bum. That is such a weird name. I guess fanny, but fanny isn't the same meaning in the US, is it? God damn it.
I don't remember seeing one in a while. So I think this is one very time-specific stereotype that can now be laid to rest, all right?
They don't say autumn. Yeah, they say fall, don't they? Whenever I watch like YouTubers and like streamers or whatever, that's always what they say. Is autumn even a term in the US? Autumn. Like, does anyone say autumn, or is it just fall? It's always fall that I hear.
And yes, I thought I'd include one that was quite topical, not just because we are in the autumn, but also because I mentioned this fact.
Wait, he's going to say it's a myth, isn't he? He's saying it's a myth, so maybe they do say it.
On my YouTube short yesterday. Now, while for reasons that were laid out in that YouTube short, Americans prefer the term fall, I was surprised to find that the word autumn was pretty common among Americans. I don't know if this is a recent thing, like the whole country just woke up one morning and watched Lost in the Pond and thought to themselves, yes, we're changing things now. Or if it's just sort of always been here as an alternative to fall. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, aren't there many surprising word alternatives that Americans use that Brits don't know about? And the answer to that is yes. I merely brought this one up so I could make that very point. This is undoubtedly a pandemic era thing, but I've seen an increasing number of Americans using the word jab to mean shot. I once worked with an American colleague who liked to use the word bonkers. So in part because of the internet, just as Britain is taking on quite a few Americanisms, I think the same is true in reverse, and it will be very interesting to look further into those details. And those are just a handful of myths that some Brits
Damn. Interesting to see, man. Another good video. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all of these myths. I never knew the fanny pack one, but it was quite funny to hear, to be fair. But thank you so much for bringing up Cahokia. Hardly anyone in America knows about it, but it's a massive city 1,000 years ago. That must have been like the biggest city in the world at this point. 20,000 people. 20,000. Was it 20,000 people in a city 1,000 years ago? That would be one of the biggest cities at that time. God damn. But yeah, hopefully enjoyed this reaction. And until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.